What kind of killer do you think stops to save a dying fish?
Dark City is a 1998 neo-noir science fiction film directed by Alex Proyas, starring Rufus Sewell, Kiefer Sutherland, Jennifer Connelly, and William Hurt. Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John, the host, and I'm joined by a stranger named Jason Alt.
Hello, I'm Jason Alt. I'll be playing the point of Alex Proyas for this, and I really wish Kiefer Sutherland had not decided to do that weird breathy voice thing, because the studio made me put a bunch of voiceover at the beginning of the movie. So the first thing you hear in the movie is, hello, I'm Kiefer Sutherland, and people say my dad is a better actor. And I heard that if you method act, people take you more seriously. This movie had a lot of cardinal sins in it. There was voiceover and there was method acting, and that was just the first second of the movie. So right off the bat, you're kind of like, oh no, did I make a huge mistake? And how I spent my $3.25 or however a movie cost in 1998. Did you make a mistake? Yes, because you didn't go see Titanic for the 9th time, because that's all anybody else did that summer. They went and saw Titanic.
It's been 84 years.
That was the mistake, because with all those cinema sins aside, and you forgot about dated CGI. However, we'll get more into that later.
But
we'll get more into it later.
That was the time, though. You can't.
No. I will. Okay, we'll get into it now. Fine. I think that the CGI was one of the most brilliant parts of the film because it knew what its restrictions were for the time. Everything is so monochrome and dark and everything, so they were able to hide all of that, like, pre-Jimmy Neutron, horrible, on your Mac computer kind of effects. It all looks so good, even now. There are like little moments, especially when it like gets a little brighter. Yes, you could see the edges, but for the most part, everything, the building shifting and forming and mutating and all that, it looks stellar. So this movie is just a collection of great choices, in my opinion.
Maybe we could talk about what this movie isn't, because right off the bat, if you haven't seen this movie, possibly one of the reasons you haven't seen this is because you heard that this was just a Matrix ripoff. So that was something I guess the director gets asked about a lot, and he never really went on the record too much. But what had happened was that he shot this in 1996, years before The Matrix, and his producers showed the producers of The Matrix, including probably the Wachowskis, an early cut of the film. And The Matrix actually they shot in Australia also, and they used at least one of Proyas's sets that he designed for this movie. Mm-hmm. If there were some visual elements in The Matrix that seem similar, well, there you go. This came out like 6 months before The Matrix, but it had to stay in post a lot because test audiences hate it so much they had to completely recut it. Including putting that dumb VO at the beginning because audiences literally couldn't figure out what was going on.
You have lost your memory. There was an experiment. Something went wrong. Your memory was erased. Do you understand me?
No, I don't understand. What the hell is going on here?
I am a pretentious film snob. I think it's safe to say that you are halfway there as well, at least. But I'm not one of those where I'm just like, I won't watch it unless it's the director's cut. I just want to see the director's vision. This is absolutely that case. Like, the director's cut is...
This is Daredevil. Like, only watch the director's cut.
100%. And if nothing else, it's for the subtractions. The voiceover taken out, I watched the director's cut today, just to refresh. Not only because Kiefer Sutherland's doing a weird bit, but just not having that initial just exposition dump of not only just like useless VO, but spoiling the fucking movie. This is a mystery. You're supposed to find stuff out. That's half the fun.
Show, don't tell.
Oh man, like
so my 5-year-old asks me questions all the time. We're watching a movie. I start watching the exact same time as her, and she's like, "Dad, who's that?" I was like, "They'll tell us."
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that's making film and television knows you have to tell the people or show them what's going on. So you don't ask questions. You just watch. And then when it's relevant, you'll be filled in. Test audiences are like a 5-year-old. Where they're like, well, who's he?
Right.
Well, actually, the whole third act of the movie is finding, well, wait, he was a different guy and now he's a different guy now? I don't know what's going on here, Edith. I thought we were standing in line for a taping of The Price is Right. Now I'm in this weird, dark cinema noir ripoff of the Jean-Paul Junet's City of Lost Children. I tell you what, if I were smart, I would not have ended up in a test audience. Therefore, you need VO at the beginning of the movie. That guy's I didn't need to write a backstory from him, but he's on vacation. He lives in South Carolina, and he and his wife and their socks and sandals were just touring LA, and they got sucked into a test audience, and they helped ruin a movie. So way to go, Edith.
Thanks so much, Edith. And then, Lenny, Edith's husband, went, shh, quiet, it's almost my voiceover scene. It's time for me.
And then Kiefer Sutherland was like, and he's just like, wait, say that again. We have to reshoot all my scenes.
Right.
Wherever your husband is, he is searching for himself.
How else will you know the guy has a weak heart? Also, I plan to say, I have a weak heart. I plan to literally say, I have a weak heart. I'm showing and telling.
So basically, Kiefer Sutherland is to blame for anything that went wrong with this movie.
It's Kiefer Sutherland's fault. This made $14 million. Because despite shooting it in 1996, they waited just long enough to release it for it to be completely boxed out at the box office by Titanic, and then have people accuse them of ripping off The Matrix. They needed both those things.
That has to have been it, right? Because the Wachowskis were just sitting there like Mr. Burns, right? Like twiddling their fingers and just like, nope, not yet. Well, we got to be first. We got to beat that Dark City thing, because that's what you do. Deep. You got to be Deep Impact. You got to beat Armageddon. However, they knew somehow. They're like, nope, just let Dark City go out. Yeah, they're a better movie, but Titanic is just a hungry beast.
That was a crazy summer for them, trying a bunch of blockbuster movies that they tried. This wasn't one of them,
right?
But they spent $100 million on Lost in Space, and I guess they forgot that Joey doesn't share box office receipts. I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but I do know that like this was a bad time for the film to come out, and that hurt it. But also, it was a deeply weird movie, and it got some pretty bad reviews because it's a very confusing movie. John, what is this confusing movie actually about?
This confusing movie is about a character named John Murdoch.
My name's Jason Murdoch. John Murdoch. Jake Murdoch. How's it going? Hi, Jack Murdoch.
He is our POV character. We are along for the ride, especially if you watch the director's cut and you don't have the whole movie spoiled for you, 5 seconds before you meet this character. He wakes up in a bathtub. He finds himself in, confused. Doesn't know what's going on. He sees that there is a murdered woman in his room, or he knocks over a goldfish and he saves it, and that kind of comes into play later.
What kind of killer do you think stops to save a dying fish?
And the whole movie basically surmises he is trying to figure out who he is and how his interactions are with the people around him. But there is other people that are in this city that are in different stages of awareness of what is really going on, because it's just like this whole thing is about it's an indictment on like just taking everything for granted, right? It's just like people have their nose to the ground so much and doing their daily grind that sometimes you don't even remember if you saw the fucking sunlight that day.
That clock's kept perfect time since I bought it.
AM or PM?
What do you think, Johnny?
I don't understand. How can it be night already? What happened in the day? How'd I miss it?
You're tired. Anything's possible.
And that is this to the inevitable conclusion, right? It's the Kafka conclusion of your everyday grind. And it's revealed that there is something a lot more nefarious going on behind the scenes.
Really funny you mentioned Kafka, because the co-writer Lem Dobbs did 2 Soderbergh movies bookending this movie, and the first one was the 1991 Kafka.
Oh, well.
So like a guy who 7 years before this literally wrote a Kafka-esque movie called Kafka, wrote a Kafka-esque script along with Alex Proyas was a co-writer, and also David S. Goyer, who is most famous for the Nick Fury Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show.
There it is.
No, for that he wrote the script to Blade the same year.
Yeah.
That this came out.
But also wrote the Hasselhoff Nick Fury. That's not a joke. That's for real.
And Batman Begins, but mostly the Nick Fury.
But I just killed you.
No, you just killed my life model decoy.
Yeah, so you look at Alex Proyas, the guy who directed The Crow.
Yeah.
You got a guy who wrote a movie about Kafka, and you got a guy that, does all the gritty DC stuff, gritty Marvel stuff, I guess, too, right? When you kind of have those ingredients, it's not really that surprising you're going to end up with something really dark, but like it's noir dark also. There's a lot of incongruity with, there's like an automat, like it's the 1950s.
Oh my God. It's so good. Yeah.
But also like some of the furnishings look a little more modern, and the guns everybody has, because you gotta have a gun. You can't have a movie if nobody has a gun, that's not considered a real movie.
And then there's a guy in the subway. Murdoch's trying to find his way to Shell Beach that's dressed in contemporary clothes.
Mm-hmm. Which is why this gets compared to The Matrix so much, because, John in this movie is Neo. He's the one person who's awake, and everybody else is just in a simulation.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
And John wakes people up just by asking them questions. He's like, when's the last time you did something during the day? How do you get to Shell Beach?
The
he just
simplest
asks these
of questions.
That start to kind of peel back the layers, but nobody gets more than a day to think about it, because every night at midnight stuff gets moved around. So people are just in this simulation, like trapped, not realizing that things are very odd, and before they have time to think about it, their memories get erased and swapped around at the end of the day. So until he comes along and kind of has some of the same powers as the people running the simulation, nobody ever thinks to question anything. They're just trying to, I guess, get their miserable, dark lives.
Well, let's talk about the people that are running the simulation. Let's kind of focus on the strangers.
Sure.
Who are the strangers? What is motivating them to be these puppet masters of these certain people's lives?
Well, the strangers are like the weirdest cast of people they could find.
Mr. Quick?
No more, Mr. Quick. Mr. Quick, dead. Yes.
There's like, let's get the guy from House of Cards
and Rocky Horror.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get all the weirdest looking people with British accents we can find.
You got to look great bald. I was really surprised that Billy Zane wasn't cast as Mr. Face or something.
This cowboy shit. You fucking ho dunk, po dunk. Well then, there, motherfuckers.
He was shooting Titanic when this movie was shot.
Oh Jesus! How could I forget?
Yeah, Billy Zane was busy that summer. Right. He's like, yeah, I would love to do your little art film, but I got to be in the biggest movie of all time. They're like, we got Kiefer Sutherland.
Consolation prize. Yeah, the strangers are one of the most dynamic villains because they're played on screen as unfeeling, monotone inevitability, but once you get a little bit of nuggets of what they're a very sympathetic race, right?
Yeah.
They are an alien race that have basically died off. And what you see in this area is what is left. And they are so desperate. They are going from planet to planet to try to, grab people and put them in grab species and put them in petri dishes and be like, you people are surviving. What is the secret? It must be your soul. Like anything. They are just desperate people or a desperate entity.
Yeah. So they're not even, it's not like a human zoo. They take people's corpses and like reanimate them and then plug and play, swapping around different memories to see if a person is more than just a collection of their memories. Because at the very beginning, there was a botched attempt to implant the memories in Jon's head to make him think he's a serial killer. And to see how he would react to that. It didn't work. And as a result, he's kind of aware of what's going on. He didn't quite get the memories. So he's being treated as a suspect in this case, but at the same time, he kind of bucks the simulation a little bit and causes a lot of havoc. But when you really think about it, this like race of aliens just wants to do experiments about human individuality to see if there is anything innate about the human spirit, or if you can just, by giving somebody a set of memories, tell them who they are and they'll behave exactly according to that. Like an allegory about, individual choice. They made a lot of these movies in the 90s, this kind of,
but not so many well done as this, though, in my opinion.
Certainly not as well written.
Yeah.
But the problem was, it doesn't really explain anything. Even less so in the director's cut, where he didn't have to hold the audience's hand. If you don't have that VO and you just you have to get an hour into the movie until you know what's going on, and people do not have the patience for that.
And the real reveal when the collective tunes for the first time and they literally bring a family from rags to riches. Like this couple is bitching at the dinner table, eating like a bowl of cereal for dinner or whatever, about how he's probably getting laid off again. And then when they tune, he like falls, his face just like flops over in a cereal bowl. And then the strangers come and they turn them into these like millionaires, right? So that scene where they transform these people and they kind of bring them up and change their lives that way. In the director's cut, is the entire scene is moved like 20 minutes deeper into the film, because in test audience they're like, what the hell's going on? People were interested in this movie for the wrong reasons. They wanted to know who killed this woman. They wanted to know if John Murdoch was a murderer or whatever. But in the correct words of Detective Lewinsky,
There's no case. Then it was. It's all just a big joke.
It doesn't fucking matter. That's the beauty of it, and that's why just the subtraction of that voiceover in the beginning and the moving of that scene of basically that is the turn of the movie. That's when it's just like it reveals itself to be like, this is a sci-fi. This is not just a neo-noir gumshoe type. So those two things is everything. The details is what sets this film apart from the other, I won't say hundreds, but the other tens amounts of films that were similar to this in the 90s. And this was something, and this movie's so rich. And I know I'm sucking this dick so hard, but
a lot.
But
I was the one who suggested this movie, and I was like,
right.
I kind of like this movie.
There is a scene in the beginning when John Murdoch is waking up, and this little detail just tickled me, because when they're rearranging people, because they don't, I mean, obviously it would be unrealistic to think that the strangers could go to the 1,000 people that are on this rock and switch out everyone's memories at midnight every night. It's not the case. They only switch out like 2, 3, 4 people to put them in different situations, and that's a catalyst to see what the change affects and who it affects. So when they do John Murdoch, they always put these like clothes like neatly for them to find or whatever, and the detail that I was just like, mind blown today when I noticed it the first time. Is he's putting on his clothes and he looks at the shoes, and he turns them over. They're brand new shoes. That's how alien these strangers are, because they're just like, shoes. We have this store closet, and this person isn't, is gonna wake up and they're just gonna put on their clothes, and then they're gonna remember they're a murderer.
Their I kill people memories.
Exactly. But that was part of waking him up from the Matrix, right? He was just like, he's looking and he's like, these are brand new shoes. And the way it's shot, it shows you him kind of recognizing that. And that's the small little details that you could go 20 years later and find and just make it so much more richer. And
if you've seen it, there is kind of a reveal. It's not a twist, it's a reveal, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not one of those movies where you see it once and you're like, yeah, I know that he sees dead people. This is a movie where you go back and you watch it a second time and you realize that everybody who was relevant to this little subplot was like, oh, your wife had an affair and you're mad and that's why you're staying at a hotel and now you're killing people. But since he didn't have that memory, everybody else is like, oh, your wife had an affair. That's why you're mad.
Right.
But that never happened. She thought that she had an affair because they put that memory in her head. And the detective, played by William Hurt, thought that he had to track him down because that was there's there was a bunch of murders. But there were no murders. There was no affair. Mm-hmm. So just thinking there is what motivated everybody to do it. And one person not agreeing with the same reality as everybody else really threw everybody off.
Right.
Because it wasn't just like, oh, this guy's nuts. Because they said that a little bit at the beginning. It's like, well, yeah, of course he's going to say crazy stuff. He's crazy. But just insisting that reality isn't what everybody said it was, and just asking a few questions, he completely flipped William Hurt's character. And that was the real turning point of the movie, where just him behaving so strangely in a way a detective had never seen before, because he wasn't agreeing on the same reality as everybody else, and not getting written off immediately as just crazy, and then nobody listens to him, and then the movie ends up with him in a straitjacket. They didn't do that.
Right.
He asked enough of the right questions and peeled back the wallpaper around this, fake reality enough to get everybody else on board. And I thought that was really interesting. The fact that you can have a whole scenario where 3 or 4 people agree something happened that didn't happen, but that becomes the reality.
Right.
She thought she had an affair. The cop thought she had an affair. If he had thought that too, then it would have been real. Mm-hmm. If everybody involved thought it happened, then it happened. And that's the nature of reality. And that's the whole point the movie's trying to make.
Yes.
What if the first time we ever met was last night in our apartment, and everything you remember and everything that I'm supposed to remember never really happened? Someone just wants us to think it did.
And they make it 10 minutes into the movie.
Yep. And the strangers add just enough, because if it was just a dark city and nothing else, it would be so bleak. And I think people would start waking up by themselves and be like, wait, what? But that beacon of the postcards and the billboards of Shell Beach. It's like, oh, I'm busy at work. It's like if someone plopped you into, your busiest day at work, and it's just like, okay, hurry up and do your stuff. And then you look over, you're just like, oh, I see a picture of a calendar of a beach, or San Diego, or Florida or something. And you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that brings me to memories and happy times, and that kind of unlocks things. So you could see the small little iterations, and yes, these things are so alien, they don't understand a goddamn thing of what makes people happy or whatever. But that's why the doctor is so essential to all of this. They didn't assimilate everyone at once. They needed that one in. And his character...
Well, he's needed for exposition, too.
Right, for the audience.
Funny. He's the one collaborator, the aliens, but he's also the one collaborator with the audience, because he does all the exposition.
Right.
What is it? The recollections of a great lover? A catalog of conquests? We will soon find out. You wouldn't appreciate that, would you, Mr. Whatever your name is?
And it's funny, too, because there is as much of a spoiler scene of what the story is really about if you just pay attention. Because even without that expose, when Jennifer Connelly's character goes and visits him for the first time, what is he looking at? He's studying a rat in a fucking maze. And he's just like, sorry, it's a rudimentary exercise, about blah, blah. It's like, no, that's the movie. You're just not paying attention. Let's talk about performances because, I think we're both in agreement. Kiefer Sutherland's kind of just out there for...
Well, he's doing some method bullshit. And
not in the same movie, right? It's just like...
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of fun. He's the only one who knows what's going on, but he kind of feels like he's the least invested in the movie. I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm not going to ascribe anything to how he acted. No one, Kiefer Sutherland's whole life, has told him he's not awesome. So...
We have the same birthday.
Least of all, somebody who paid him to be in his movie. So when you have someone who just grew up rich and then got to be an actor because his dad was an actor and then doesn't get in trouble for all the times he drove drunk, when you have someone who's never been told no his entire life and then you put him in a movie and he's like, this line of dialogue that says he has a bad heart that he could be saying just because he doesn't want to get the shit kicked out of him anymore. We don't know. He's got a weak heart, so he talks like a complete asshole. And everyone's like, all right, Kiefer, you're the most famous person in this movie, so...
He was the name. He was the name.
We're going to let you do that, but, sure wish you wouldn't. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna. And... everybody else in the movie was fine because acting's not that hard. And acting like you don't know what's going on is even easier than regular acting.
Okay, so I have a theory about this, especially because Jennifer Connelly is always cast in these roles. But Jennifer Connelly especially, and William Hurt, I'll say, in this, feel like they're on Valium. During the entire runtime, everything is so monotone. Even his, because he tries to get in some one-liners, just like, no one listens to me.
Run!
No one ever listens to me.
Or there's always been this line that it still drives me nuts to this day, and it's what she says. And it's when she goes and visits the detective for the first time, and she's just like,
why are you looking for my husband? Are you going to accuse him of something?
I have a theory. I think they've scrambled people's brains so much that it's just starting to break their brains down.
They're reanimated corpses.
Essentially.
All of them. They are.
Well, the strangers
that's what
are.
they said they did.
The strangers
They said they didn't snatch humans. They took dead bodies and then reanimated them and then did a weird puppet show with them.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because that also implies that the only difference between us and a corpse are our memories.
Ooh.
That's why I brought up City of Lost Children. Visually, this shares a lot of elements. So when this gets accused of ripping off The Matrix, it's like, no, The Matrix ripped off this, which ripped off City of Lost Children, which itself ripped off Brazil. Everybody who's not making either The Hangover or The Avengers 4 is just doing Terry Gilliam. If you're doing anything weird, it's Cronenberg or Gilliam. So
it's fair.
But the people who made City of Lost Children, Terry Gilliam actually produced Jean-Paul Genet's Delicatessen, which came out 2 years after City of Lost Children.
Mm-hmm.
So the visually Brazil kind of inspired City of Lost Children, which inspired this, which inspired The Matrix. So Matrix is just a Brazil ripoff.
It's we're just eating our own ass at this point.
Well, it's the telephone game.
Yeah.
Enough where you're you know what Brazil needed 2 15-minute gunfights. That's what was missing from Brazil.
Then it would just be The Matrix?
People didn't like this movie because nobody shot each other. Nobody pointed out all the plot holes in The Matrix the way they did in this movie. And this movie has plot holes because the studio butchered it.
Yeah.
The Matrix has plot holes because it's just an excuse to move from set piece to set piece with people shooting at each other.
Yes.
That's a bit reductive. I think The Matrix is a fantastic allegory about the trans experience that they just put to all of America, and nobody realized it was a movie about the trans experience. And even trans people had, like, once they figured it out, they're like, oh my God, it was there the whole time.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's almost like people are rediscovering The Matrix as, like, their egg cracking movie. And I think that's cool. And I like The Matrix. So, like, maybe I'm being defensive a little bit too much, because, like, this getting compared to The Matrix is not the reason nobody went to see it. Nobody went to see it because, like, everyone was going to see Titanic. I get that. So, yeah, The Matrix was a good movie, but The Matrix borrowed some elements and literally a set piece from this movie, and was kind of quiet when people would accuse Dark City of ripping The Matrix off.
But also the people liked The Matrix for the wrong reason. It was like the Fight Club syndrome.
Well,
the wrong fan base liked it.
Yeah, I mean maybe, but they made The Matrix the way they did to make it appeal broadly.
Right, which this film did not.
Were to sugarcoat the message about, like, the nature of your reality and how you perceive yourself inside the Matrix, and what a different experience it is to feel like you're a different person than you're presented.
Sure.
You know, and when the Wachowskis transitioned after, I think, maybe the third Matrix movie, all that stuff made sense retroactively, which is why the stuff's cool. Like, to go back to the movies and try to pick that stuff out is cool. But if they just made a movie as like, this is what it's like to be trans, I don't know if people would be as into that.
No,
but they sort of sugar-coated all that allegory with a bunch of sweet gunfights, and then literally invented a new way to shoot action scenes. The whole bullet time thing got, everybody parodied it because they invented a new way to shoot a scene, which was crazy. So all of that was a factor about why the Matrix did so much better, is because it was made to appeal to people.
The first Matrix had a message with people shooting each other with guns in the background as a backdrop. Then the second and third movie became people shooting each other with guns, and then a message somewhere hidden in the backdrop, where this one is completely unmolested that way. This one wasn't trying to pander to audiences. This one wasn't trying to gain. I really don't think like look at The Crow. Like, the proof is in the pudding as far as that goes.
Well, I think he thought what worked for The Crow would work for this, but ironically,
people moved on.
It worked for The Matrix better, because he's kind of like, I'm going to present an aesthetic, because that's all The Crow was.
Yes,
The Crow was a pretty
hot topic
weak movie with just one of the best movie soundtracks of all time. Right?
Amen.
Like, it had tragedy surrounding it, and that gave it a little bit of mystique, I think.
Kick punching was not the reason for The Crow.
Yeah, the Crow was like, it was like an Asian style film. Like, they do, like, Korea. Does anybody do a revenge film better than the Koreans? So it had kind of some of those aesthetics to it, plus the whole, like, neo-noir sort of, well, not neo-noir, because neo-noir is futuristic. I guess contempo noir, it was like, it's 96, but everyone has a leather duster. And they tried that, but the only people they put in leather dusters were the creepy aliens. So they all look like a Clive Barker movie. And it just, I guess if there's no one you can cosplay as, it's not a great movie. Whereas people saw Neo in a leather duster, and they're like, I'm going to wear this to school until the principal thinks I'm going to shoot everybody and asks me to stop wearing it.
I'm laughing because next time I go to Comic-Con or a Gen Con, I'm literally going to say I'm cosplaying as John Murdoch.
Yeah, you're just in a suit.
Yeah.
These shoes are brand new. That's a detail that I picked up on.
Shell
These
Beach.
shoes today, my feet hurt.
How do I get to Shell Beach? Can't tell me?
Everyone's like, no, I don't know what you're referencing. I'm Gen Z. I literally only know anime. Is that a thing about Gen Z? I don't know.
Other thing that was changed for the director's cut was just little fine tuning, all the puns intended, of the special effects, and not of the buildings shifting or anything like that. And can I just say that there are some cool practical tricks with that as well?
Yeah.
Like the actual buildings, like pieces of buildings moving up and squishing in. Like there's just so much atmosphere, but you can't really tell, and it doesn't get credit for there being so much because it's so goddamn dark. You can't see all the little details that are there, but they're there. And that's how you know they're there, because they don't stand out. You're not just like, ugh, that's a spray painted cardboard box in the corner. No, it's like
all this stuff worked for The Crow for sure.
Yeah.
Because The Crow felt like a sequel to Lost Boys.
Yes. Oh my God.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like it's a dark movie with a good soundtrack, and the plot's a little thin, but nobody cares because it's just kind of like a nostalgia kick, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, this I think learned the wrong lessons from The Crow. And he wasn't trying to make that movie, but I think visually he ended up like he went on record and said the building shifting around was something he got from like moving sets on the set of The Crow, and he was like, "Oh man, what if that was a thing for real buildings?" So in a sense, Inception is just a Brazil ripoff.
Okay, you asked for it. I'm information retrieval officer. These heads struck 105, and I'm arresting you. So drive on, or I'll blast your fucking head off.
Nolan credited this movie not just with Inception, with the themes of, is your reality real, but the movie that Christopher Nolan made closer to when Dark City came out, Memento, which is Matrix alumnus Carrie-Anne Moss was in both of those movies, and they're both about memory as like how you perceive yourself. You know, this movie and Memento were both about if your memories are wrong, what could you end up doing? You know, and if you saw Memento, a false memory was the whole point of that film.
And I know you said it tongue in cheek, but you said like learned all the wrong lessons for The Crow. Which one are you really rewatching though? Because I think this holds up like 10 times better than The Crow. The Crow is cool. The Crow is moody.
It was cool in '96.
You could put it on in the back. No, I meant for today. Like you could put it on in the background, and because the soundtrack fucks so hard, you're just like, I'm gonna vacuum the shit out of this living room watching The Crow, right? But like just to literally sit down, like watching Dark City now is it's not like watching it for the first time, but I'm saying there's still so many little details, so many little things to pick apart. The cardinal sin, I guess the real cinema sin of this film is it wasn't made for the general audience. It was made for film students, I think. I think that Alex Proyas wanted that vanity wank where he's just like, I want my movie. I want 5 people in 20 years to pick apart my movie and notice that I put clean shoes in that scene. More so than like, have the Matrix come out or whatever. I don't know. I feel like he made this like this intentionally.
I mean, it could be. I think very controversially, I wanted to say coming into this that I think this holds up better than The Matrix, but I think that because I'm less inclined to rewatch The Matrix. Mm-hmm. Just because, like, if you took out all the gunfights, The Matrix wouldn't be much of a movie. And Dark City, I think I am appreciating it more just because it got the point across, and it had, it had action without having to have the invincible protagonist that I guess Die Hard is responsible. The Army of One concept.
It's the chosen one, and it's been played to death. However, the way it handles it this time, because it's just like, okay, we've selected this species to study and to learn from and to basically be our salvation, and the species is just like, fuck you, we're going to adapt to learn how to beat you. And that makes a little bit more sense than just you are the chosen one because blah, mashed potatoes. It never matters why unless it's Dark City. And it has real reasons where you're like, okay, I could see why maybe not just this guy, but someone would finally like start adapting. You mess with something so much, and something like intakes so much trauma, it's going to figure out how to turn against its captors and its aggressors. It's that whole natural selection. And in this film, the human race is a superior race to whatever these things are. These things were supposed to be dead. They were done. They existed. They were the dinosaurs, right? It's like if the dinosaurs learn inner space travel, but they're still, their time is still up. You can't change that part of it.
The message is a little more hopeful if you finally grasp it, in that like there is inherent goodness in humans, and that's what this race of aliens coveted, and they were trying to figure out what about the human condition would make someone who thinks he's a serial killer save a goldfish, to the point where like a detective found that incongruous.
Wanted to know what it was about us that made us human. Well, you're not gonna find it in here. You went looking in the wrong place.
Why the cult of films exists, because if you dig deep enough on this channel, you'll see I've actually talked about Dark City before, talked about it with Jay from Classic Flicks years ago. Like, I think it was right when it was the 20-year anniversary of Dark City. But the point of the cult of films is just to make sure that people just don't forget about this shit, because like who that's under 25 years old has heard of this film. And that's
it's really people that like are seeking out like the list of like, oh, the 20 best sci-fi movies you haven't seen, because that's where unfortunately this movie ends up on the, you know, coolest 90s sci-fi movie that you missed.
Yeah, so I am more than happy to keep talking about this film. I mean, let's meet up in another 5 years and do another Dark City discussion, because it always should be that relevant. It is definitely a tentpole film. It's not a Fight Club. It's not a Requiem for a Dream. It still holds up, and maybe that's just, you know, speaks to how pretentious we are or whatever, but, you know, I don't care. It's just it's a movie that challenges the audience, and the audiences didn't want to be challenged, and that's why it got released theatrically and it got released watered down, and that's really a problem. And that's, I mean, Roger Ebert did the commentary track on this. How many other films did he do that for? He was obsessed with this film, and he got a lot wrong. Like, let's not, you know.
Yeah.
He got a lot wrong. He didn't get this one wrong. That is our episode. Tune in another 5 years. We'll bring up Dark City again. But until then, where can everyone find you, Mr. Jason Murdoch?
Jon Murdoch.
Why don't you just put my Twitter handle up on the screen? Like, what do I have to say it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you did it. You did it with the power editing.
Wait, hold on.
Look at that.
There it is. Yeah.
Oh. Better special effects than Dark City. I used the power of my mind to make Jon do it, and nothing rippled. Yeah. I'm tuning.
Let everyone know we're talking about cult films. Listen to this in podcast form, because, I mean, that's still a thing. We get way more podcast listeners than views on YouTube. Apparently, you guys like listening to us talk while you're driving in the car. Yeah,
I don't get it either.
Until next time, tune in. Tune in next time